Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. It's my pleasure to have with us tonight Harry Gross, who works with us at the Neurological Institute in charge of research or something like that. Harry, welcome. And tonight we'll discuss some of the things that we've worked on, which involves the interstices of healthcare. And we obviously do neurosurgery, but one thing that we observe are many problems that exist in the healthcare system. So we've made an effort to look into those issues. And tonight we'll talk a little bit about healthcare investment. And I'll just start off by saying the way our healthcare system is structured, it's mostly an on-demand system. So when people say I'm sick or I don't feel good, I want some help with that, then that's what happens. And in Georgia, there's about $125 billion every year that goes into this system. However, a relatively small amount of, is invested, if one can use that word, in improving the healthcare apparatus. And these investments have a very positive return for the public. Now, I've said that, Harry. Do you have anything to add to my epistle?
I would say that the difficulty with healthcare investment is that it's not exactly a quick return, right? That's what makes it, I think, a little bit more difficult to do for the healthcare system as we have it set up. That when we think of investments like the stock market, we can sometimes realize gains pretty quickly, depending on what you're investing in. Healthcare investment's a long-run bet, and it's focusing on things to improve health decades down the road, not just a couple years. And so it has a very long run, and it has a lot of opportunities, I think, for us to lower healthcare costs, to improve health outcomes, and to get a better, more efficient system. But it's going to require conscious, distinct policy choices to get us there.
And yeah, we'll go through some slides. Some of our inquiry that's taken us in this direction, but I will say that the first thing that we struck as we examined the situation, particularly in Georgia, was the absence of any kind of appropriate numbers that would help us make any comments. So the numbers are very difficult to obtain. And the way the system works, I think the oversight of the system to make improvements is somewhat lacking. There is an oversight, but the way that works out, I think it's not as efficient as it might be. So I'm going to start by just saying, let's see our first slide, which I can show. And here's a great picture of George Washington crossing the Delaware. And that's the way our country started, a revolution. There were a lot of efforts of our ancestors to change the system, make things better. And so we submit that there's an argument for the American healthcare system to at least consider what can be done with investments in that system. So that's our first slide. Let's see our next slide. We're going to push the button. So this is it's an existentialist problem. There is our country, the American healthcare system, rolling along, and it's struck an iceberg, which are the cost and then indeed the results of the system. So I think everyone in the audience, or most people in the audience, can say how extraordinarily expensive healthcare is, how hard it is to get in the apparatus, and the difficulties of that, and that's kind of what we're going to discuss now. Harry, do you have any thoughts about these large costs? I mean, you've observed this just in your part of the world. Is that right?
Yeah, it's, I think, becoming increasingly unsustainable. There is, especially as many of these costs are not sunk. I mean, they're the result of market forces, and they can be fixed with market forces.
Yes.
But they are going to require some policy efforts to make these changes, because we are not getting the bang for our buck that we should be in this system.
Well, let's next slide, please. We'll just move along here. And this just shows the exponential increase in the nation's healthcare expenses. And at the top of this curve, it is flattening out a bit. So there are some efforts underway to flatten that curve out. The issue that we've discovered, I think, is a lot of this is referable to pseudo-rationing. So there's a rationing system the public is not totally aware of, although occasionally they understand it when it affects them. And that's a big issue. And our little graph here starts at it stops at 2018, but trust me, the process continues.
Yes.
Next slide, please. All right, and this is the Harry. You're from Georgia. Were you born here?
I was.
So
yes.
we're looking at the Empire State of the South, are we not?
Oh yes.
Right. And Macon, Georgia, is right in the middle of the Empire State of the South. And in our state, I mentioned the number. As far as we can tell, about $125 billion is spent every year on health care in the state. Now that is just an astronomical number, $125 billion. And if you make inquiries, what's happening with $125 billion? Where does it go? Who gets it? Who makes the decisions about this money? And I would submit there's not any appropriate overview of this system. The feds try and do something, they do, and indeed the state government does. But if you try and extract exactly what's going on, I think it could be done in a better fashion. Next slide, please. Well, just investigating, these are some numbers for 2021. About basically the number here, it's even more now, is about $4 trillion. And it's been said this is greater than the gross national product of France. So it's a huge number. It's an unbelievable number. And about 83% of that number just goes to patients treating disease, and it goes through different aliquots there. It's about 4.4% on government health services, about 1.4% on research efforts, and about 3.4% on infrastructure and technology. Now, just looking in that, it is hard to say in those numbers what's actually being spent on what some people might call an investment. So the numbers are not as good as we would like them. Next slide, please. Now, so we're going toward a better solution, healthcare investment. Let's talk a little bit about that. Next slide. So now I believe you have a high theological title in the Episcopalian Church, is that correct?
Not a high
exactly is
theological
your
title. No, I'm the chair of the Episcopal Diocese of Atlanta's Global Mission Commission.
That sounds like a nice title. And so you're familiar with the Bible and,
Yes.
And the idea of investing talents, that's what one should do. And I'd say talents also meaning your own personal abilities. You say that should be invested in the world. And so I think most people would say, yes, investment's a good idea. Next slide, please. And now, Edgar Allan Poe. See, I'm asking these questions of you, Harry, because of your wide cultural background. Do you want to discuss the Purloined Letter as to why we put that?
I think it's a story about a solution hidden in plain sight, right?
Yes.
The answer, everyone is rushing to try and find this letter that it's missing, and it's never been actually taken, right?
It's right there.
Right there.
And so we're making the case that improving the healthcare system, the answer is right there in investment. Mm-hmm. Next slide, please. Okay, and now this is something I have to say I'm a conservative person in many ways. I like to see individuals do it and not have the government too involved. But this is one, I think, appropriate use of government power and funding. So the government does a lot of things that are very appropriate. They put highways up, freeways, they do airports. And so there is an argument that a lot of the investment that could be offered might come through the government channels. We make that point. Harry, I know that you would second that. Is
Yes,
that correct?
yes. One of the troubles with having the capitalist system that we have is that profit is the overarching motive. And for corporations, like insurance companies, for even nonprofit hospital corporations, right? They're going to try and maximize their revenue intake. And investment pieces like major infrastructure, like the kind of overarching changes we're going to end up suggesting, are not going to be profitable in the long run. And so this is a perfect area for government to step in and relieve corporations of that burden to make sure that the public good is served, even when market forces may not point them out.
And we'll expand the notion of profit. And so I think we'll expand the definitions of that a bit. But let's go to the next slide, please. And then we can just say, what is healthcare investment? And it can be a lot of things, but as we list here, we have improved structural system to manage acute care, which is a big problem in Georgia. Getting new technology in the system is a big deal. And we're going to push a lot on early diagnosis, disease prevention, and then communication with the American public, so they're aware of what it takes to have a healthy life and make things as good as they can for themselves and their families. Next slide, please. We're going to kind of say these are things that investment can do. They do all kinds of secondary things if society's health arrangements are optimal. So incarceration decreases. I mean, there are big arguments about that. Disability payments decrease. People have more active lives. Mental illness, depression, and suicides decrease with a good healthcare system that's busted by appropriate money for research and investment. Crime goes down, we have useful employment, there's increase in tax collections, and there's also a decrease in secondary government expenses as a healthy population won't make use of a lot of government funding. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of good things that come from this. Well, we sort of get into the idea of a social contract. There's a picture of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who is a great savant of the 18th century in France, and he was an arch figure in the Enlightenment and contributed really to the end of kingship and maybe democracy and republics. And his thought was, he was not the first person to discuss a social contract, but the idea is there is a contract between the individual, the group, between an individual and his representative government. And and health care investment is a big part of that. So if you're an American citizen, you live here, it would be reasonable to say that part of your contract with the society involves a health care system that will be useful for you, your family, and will help everyone else. Next slide, please. And so relatively small investments we're going to submit have a big major impact. Next slide. And now we sort of made this point a little bit, which is the investments in healthcare. Often it takes a long time for the results to appear. For instance, if you have we have here the analogy between a healthy and an unhealthy diet. So if you have a healthy diet, you're going to live a longer time, you're going to do great, and it will take a while for that to appear. An unhealthy diet, well, it'll still take a while for it to appear, but then it will. So the same it goes along with investment. So that's our thought. The return on healthcare investments may take a while. Next slide, please. And this is what we can do to preserve organ function. Now, just talking about the human condition, one of the things that happens is that all our organs decay day by day. And so if we can keep our skin going okay, our respiratory situation good, our bone structure okay, we can have a much better, longer and better life, but they will still go out. And so what this just says, if we make a good healthcare investment, these comorbidities will not appear too acutely. Next slide, please. What happens is this is kind of a schematic story about what really goes on with healthcare outcomes. And the thing to say is that all of the money, a huge amount of this $125 billion that's out there, has a relatively small impact on health. As one, that seems a pretty outstanding thing to say, but it's much better if people watch their diet, they are restrained in their activity, they exercise, they jump around, they're informed about the world, and also having a job is a big part of health. And a fair amount of income is also part of that system. And where all of this positive events play out is in the brain and neurotransmitters. So if maybe someone in the audience can notice this, if you just your world is not good, maybe you lost your job or the Georgia Bulldogs didn't make it, whatever, then it's a subtle change in your neurotransmitters, and that has a really unhealthy impact. So when you finally come to the hospital and you have your brain tumor taken out and it costs a lot of money, the impact is fairly de minimis in regards to the whole health situation. So the secondary things are true. Now, Harry, any comments about that?
Yes. Where investment is particularly useful is in the things that we don't always think about, right? Making sure that our air is clean, we're breathing good air, right? Which leads to better respiratory outcomes. That our water is safe to drink, right? We're not having to deal with, typhus and dysentery and all these diseases that killed, millions of people throughout human history. That we have, kind of stable communities, right, that can support us. And making sure that we have access to the facilities that we need to. And when we go to see a physician, we're able to get the treatments and screenings and things that we need to catch things as early as possible so that we don't end up in an emergency room and get diagnosed with stage 4 cancer when we could have caught at stage 1 or stage 2.
Right. That would be a good idea, and those are sort of our ideas. Well, next slide, please. Okay, now these are things that we sort of spoke about, and they're sort of axiomatic. This is really a good bang for the buck as far as health goes. Investing in clean water, that's a big deal. Clean air is a big deal. A safe food supply, that's a big deal. And also communicable diseases and prevention. Now, Harry and I wrote a book on the coronavirus, and I won't belabor our points on that. That's a big deal. And also access to vaccinations. So obviously, vaccinations do a lot of good, and the general public access to that needs to be assured. So these are things that are good, and they involve investment. Next slide, please. And these are some of the benefits in preventive treatment. And there are just a number of, I won't overkill this, but the idea is that if we get vaccinations, for instance, or we have childhood appropriate treatment for childhood diseases, et cetera, then this in the end saves money, which is going to be sort of our point. And this is part of the equation that I don't think the public totally understands. When a healthcare dollar is expended, it has a return, just like if you invest in the stock market in a way, you're going to get some money back. Society will get money back from that in a more productive population, not as many people that are incapable of working, less disability payments. So that's a pretty good, a good thing for preventive treatment. And so as much preventive treatment as we can put in the system, so much the better. Next slide, please. And improved diagnosis is a big deal. and I won't overkill this, but the sooner we can discover disease, so much the better. And I see this in the future as a really positive event that could take place. So I could imagine at home there's be a little widget you could put your finger in every day, and that widget could send information about your general well-being to a centralized location where anything that's amiss will be determined at an early point. So that would be a huge thing if you think about it, particularly in Georgia with its large rural population and people have a hard time getting to the doc, then they're in general getting care, and just having that in a home would be a huge thing. Any comments, Harry, on this?
Yeah, early diagnosis is something that definitely needs to be invested in more, because where we see the most expenses being paid out in the healthcare system is in trying to clean up the aftermath of late stage diseases, chronic conditions that if they had been caught earlier would have been much more manageable, perhaps even curable to some degree. And so being able to focus on these things is going to be a huge part of the healthcare system of the future.
So you could say, for instance, I enjoyed that pork chop. I had 3 pork chops last night or whatever. That's good. It was good. What's that doing to my lipid profile, and what's happening with my coronary arteries, and understanding, well, look at that. They're really starting to plaque up here, and doing that sooner than later would be a big deal. Discovering cancer, the big deal would be it's inevitable that these changes will take place. At least 25% of the people that die in the United States die with cancer. And the sooner that it's discovered, so much the better. And there are many tests out there that lend themselves to wide application. It'd be great to get that in the system. Next slide, please. Well, this is the benefits of improved communication. Well, let's see. There's someone with is that Samuel Johnson? Who is that with us?
No, that's just...
it's just a random figure.
A random individual.
I would say my wife complains that my hearing is diminished, and she's offered to get me one of these little horns to put in my ear, and she could shout into it and get through to me. So, okay, all right. Improved communication. Next slide, please. So this is just what can happen. So improved health education. So that would be an investment so people understand what the deal is about obesity, reckless behavior, early pregnancy, all those things. If the young people understood that, that would be a really good investment for the government to make. Next slide, please. And reducing illegitimacy, that would be a huge thing. And I'll make this comment: if you really examine what's going on in our country, is, for better or worse, the relationships, the gender relationships have been altered, and it's the illegitimacy rate is enormous. It's just gone up tremendously. And the disturbed family systems have a bad impact everywhere, including in health. So if we could do something to stabilize this, it would be a good thing. And I'll just leave it at that. All right, next slide, please. And now here's some additional investment ideas. Is that me beside the fire there? I don't know. Self-portrait, okay. Next slide, please. All right, now this is a big deal. This is the improved healthcare technology. And so we're on the cusp of a major revolution, a tremendous revolution in understanding causality with artificial intelligence, and healthcare lends itself to this. So putting artificial intelligence in the healthcare system has a tremendous positive possibility. And certainly the government should be looking into it. Private enterprise is looking into it for profit motivation. Nothing wrong with that. But that's a big thing. And this, I think, is from the Battle of Waterloo. That's a British cavalry regiment charging against the pesky French there. Okay. Next slide, please. Nothing wrong with the French here. Or AI. Now, you could say right now, I'll just talk a little bit about that. Artificial intelligence has been out there floating around in one form or another for a while. It just hasn't been called that. So now it's being called that, and people are, well, what does this mean? It's out there now in many ways. The big deal would be getting sufficient computer capability to do something, and getting the data is a huge thing. So data harvesting turns out to be a big deal, and the way it's coded is a big deal. So putting that system in place really would be a tremendously positive thing. Any comments on AI? Did you learn about that in high school, Harry, or what?
I mean, that was kind of the revolution that took place right at the end of high school for me, kind of college level. By grad school, that was one thing that we definitely were focusing on for the implications of that for security and all sorts of things. But I mean, there are a number of concerning areas with AI. We need data privacy. The rules have not been written yet for how this technology can be used and developed. And that is an area where we are going to have to step up and, consciously create a new system. But if we get it right and we create a system that protects people's data while still getting that data to the people who can make the best use of it, we can have incredible capacity to, like you said, we could have widgets in our homes that can just send data out, and an AI can help make sense of that and interpret that for a physician. And we can have these massive, backlogs of data that the healthcare system struggles to deal with, and we can actually take that and get useful information out of it to make people's lives better.
Right, and we can move on, but I'll make this comment. As the state legislature is meeting now, they had a 40-day session. Not a bad thing to at least think about in those lofty places under the Gold Dome. All right, next slide, please. And telemedicine is a good thing to do. We did more of that in the coronavirus epidemic. Maybe it's not as much as it was, but that's a really good thing. I think it would give people a lot of security to have access to it. Expand that. That would be a good thing. Next slide, please. And basic research. So we could say that the U.S. is spending a huge amount of money, and there are many, many inefficiencies in the healthcare system. So, said 125 billion sloshing around. On the other hand, the U.S. is the driver for technological innovation, for progress, for you name it, cancer, whatever. The tremendous amount of stuff comes out of our country. This is a picture of NIH. That's a real positive thing. The government continue to put money into research is very appropriate. Next slide. I'll now discuss obesity and the new meds that have come out to do something about that. There's just unbelievably positive results have taken place. Now, right now, the meds were initially used for people with diabetes, and actually the indications are expanding. And many, let's say, potential movie star wants to knock that extra 5 pounds off. I don't know, whatever. That's kind of off-label, but people are using it. All of the side effects are not totally known. But if you look at what could really turn the situation around in Georgia, would be pretty widespread access to these medications under appropriate doctor supervision. So that would be a huge, big thing to do. Now, the issue is what it costs to do this. So more or less, pick your number, maybe $1,000 a month right now. I mean, it's a rough number, maybe a little more. And so that's a huge number for insurance companies and for the government to undertake, particularly in a time of being very concerned about budget overruns and national debt. On the other hand, the payback for reducing obesity would just be tremendous. This would be huge. And if you look at the body mass index of all kinds of people at risk, getting those body mass indexes down would be a tremendously positive thing. So this would be a healthcare investment, just making this medication available. And I will say this is somewhat of a miracle, and it's come out of our inefficient healthcare system. And these miracles need to be applauded. I'll say that. So that's a real positive thing. Next slide, please. Okay, acute care. Now, I look after a lot of people in the emergency room, and right now there are about 11 million people in the state, and the system has its good points to it. They have the state trauma commission that tries to do a good job. However, this lends itself to a much better system where there could be sort of a statewide triage system, a big fancy computer where all the ambulances are. Everything is real time going into the center. So ambulance A, go to place B. It appears to be this is what's up, and we're going to get you where you need to go very, very quickly. So that would be a big thing in the future. Next slide. All that sounds good, but it's not easy. Click. Right. The trouble with investment is that if we do something, presumably the money is going to come from somewhere else. And at least my observation about the way the system works, at least in Georgia, is there are powerful stakeholders and providers out there that don't want the system easily changed, which is reasonable, but they've got their own self-interest there, and I won't demean what they do, but they resist change, and that causes some problems about putting the efficiencies in there. Next slide. And so we have to alter this. The picture is a little dam here, altering the flow of capital in healthcare. So right now, the capital that's invested in healthcare is pretty much going in for demand issues. So we're going to we're going to fulfill the demand. People say, well, I have trouble getting my sore feet looked into, and we'll find a way to do that, and then will be compensation for it. But long-term capital investments in things that pay off in the future, it's difficult to get that money where it needs to go. Next slide. So there are many, many funding reallocations. I mean, I'm sure if you take something for Peter to pay Paul, it's a big problem. And particularly if someone has something, it's very, very difficult to diminish that. You could say, I've been raising your salary 5% every year, no increase next year. Well, they don't like that, but people grouse. But if you decreased it 5%, that's a big problem. And sort of what's going on right now is the inflation issue is silently doing this. As inflation kicks in, the payers and the healthcare system just don't increase their funding as much as they need to. And so you could say, for instance, in Medicare funding for health services, there's a lot of inflation in the system, but last year the government paid 3% less for these services, and this year the plan is to throw another 3% decrease in the system. And of course, inflation is there also, so effectively the government is really diminishing numbers. And the way they do that has a tremendous effect, and I'm not sure the public totally understands it. I'll leave it at that. Next slide, please. And we spoke about this a little earlier. Numbers, numbers, numbers. If you try saying what exactly do we call investment, what is the actual benefits for this, it's very, very hard to get that. I mean, and there are a lot of issues. Number one is that private enterprise, their numbers are protected. You just can't come in and take somebody's numbers away. And then number two, if the state were making inquiries about what's up here, presumably with a commission that looked into the problem, it would have to be an open meeting, and so all the stakeholders would turn up, and it'd be difficult to put through any kind of substantial reforms. Next slide, please. And as best we can determine, relatively little money goes to health care. I won't get into this. There's probably about we could say 10 to 15% of healthcare expenses is devoted to healthcare investment. That's a very equivocal, difficult number. That's as much as that's one wild guess.
That's a guesstimate
And
at
it
best.
it might be pretty difficult to come to. So no one can say. And it would be great to get some kind of numbers. And yes, you have a comment here?
Well, the hard part with calculating these numbers, right, is one, what do we count as healthcare investment, right? Because it's such a broad area of things that have knock-on effects, that have salutary impacts on healthcare, that housing policy is in some way healthcare investment. Anti-poverty programs can be healthcare investment. There's all kinds of things that we don't necessarily think about, and so it's difficult to figure out what to count when we look at those numbers. And then also, if healthcare investment is working, sometimes we don't even get the numbers to count because the events never occur, right? If we have a beneficial investment policy on preventative care, then we're not going to necessarily see the impact of that because it did what it was supposed to and removed conditions from the pool that diminished values in other areas. And so it alters the kind of the bookkeeping side of all of this that makes it very complicated and convoluted to get these numbers.
And it's a philosophical issue here that it's way out there about what exactly healthcare is. And do you get healthcare from a physician in a hospital, or maybe you get healthcare at a church, so to speak? I mean, I'll throw that out about your general level of civility and connection with other people. All those things are out there, but we'll let that go now. All right, next slide, please. So the public needs to be aware of just what we've discussed here, I think. I'll throw that out. That's one of my favorite pictures. This is a Norman Lincoln Rockwell picture that he made with the 4 freedoms in World War II, and this is the freedom of speech that allegedly we have. I mean, we could say maybe we don't have this anymore, but this is the idea that you have a right to express yourself. Rather getting increasingly difficult to do that, but in regards to these healthcare issues, I think it's appropriate that we have these discussions. Next slide, please. And so our conclusion is that we just went through a few things. Healthcare policymakers and the general public should understand the benefits of investing in healthcare. So that ought to be part of the national dialogue in the forthcoming electoral cycle. We are discussing healthcare. What kind of investments is the government prepared to undertake in healthcare? Investments, not payments to whatever providers. Investments. Well, all right. And our last slide. So thank you. That's good. Well, we've been through a lot here, Harry. Now, people in your age group, are they concerned about healthcare investment? I'll just ask that question.
Not investment in itself, but they're concerned about healthcare itself. I think my generation in particular is very concerned about access, affordability, being able to even get in to see a doctor or have healthcare. I'm lucky enough to have a very good health insurance plan that, and one of my best friends she's had thyroid cancer already in her mid-20s, and that means that now every job she looks at, everything, she's like, I have to have healthcare. I have to have this level of coverage. I have to be able to do this. And I think a focus on healthcare investment would help address many of the concerns that people of my generation and younger feel now and will feel in the future.
Well, Harry, speaking as a senior citizen here, we're going to give you the football, and I hope you don't fumble. And
I hope we don't either.
And on that note, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure.
Yes.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.